went to America. Several languages, obviously, and Freud, Zurich, and eventually settled in Palestine in the 1920s, late 1920s, where he practiced psychoanalysis. He'd studied under William Steckel, who was one of the first pupils of Jung and Freud. He studied with Freud. So he was a polymath. He was a multifaceted scientist. He spoke several languages. Obviously, he spoke Russian, he spoke French, he spoke German, obviously English. In 1938, he took time out and went to America. In 1939, obviously, we know what happened, Second World War, so basically he stayed in America for the rest of his life, from 1938 onwards. And while he was studying, he asked himself a question. The question was there any record in Egyptian history of the 10 plagues of Egypt as recorded in the Bible, in the book of Exodus? The 10 plagues of Egypt. They were the plagues which drove the Israelites out of Egypt into what became Palestine, what is now Israel. So the question, was there any record in Egyptian history of the 10 plagues as recorded in the Bible? It's recorded in the Bible, and if you look in your Bible that has dates on it, you'll see there's a date to the 10 plagues. It's 1450 BC. And nobody knew if there was any record in Egyptian history, because this was obviously a major event. What was going on? A major event in biblical history recorded in the Old Testament, but apparently not recorded in Egypt. So is it a myth? Is it fiction? Is it something which somebody's made up? No, it wasn't. Velikovsky eventually found the reference. It was in what's called the Ipuwer, I-P-U-W-E-R, Ipuwer Papyrus. It's now in the Leiden Museum in Holland. You can see it. You can't read it necessarily unless you read hieroglyphics, but it records the event which we know as the plagues of Egypt. Now, these plagues were not ordinary things. They were powerful events. They describe hail. But if you look at the original Hebrew, the word translated into hail, the Hebrew word is barad, which means stones. Now, at the time it was translated, nobody had the faintest idea what could be stones coming down from the sky. We know them as meteorites. But at the time, the scientists at the time had no idea. So it was translated as hail, which is a little bit disconcerting. Velikovsky asked the question, he answered it to his own satisfaction, that there was a record in Egypt. So it was recorded in 2 places, all right, adjoining countries. Egypt and Palestine are adjoining countries. And he wrote his first book. His first book recorded that event. And his first book was, the first book he wrote, not the first book he published, was Ages and Chaos. The first book that was published was Worlds in Collision. Now, anybody here not heard of this book? Not heard of it? Okay. Very few people not heard of the book Worlds in Collision. All I'll say, it is one of the classics of the 20th century. Worlds in Collision. It's probably the best known. Velikovsky actually wrote 7 books. And I won't ask here who has read all 7 of them, because I know what the answer will be. Has anybody here actually read all 7? No. Okay. Velikovsky's been forgotten. He's been sidelined. Hence, very few people know about him. But if you look in any of the major works, you're familiar with Graham Hancock's work, I expect. You're familiar with Eric von Daniken's work. You're familiar with work of many of the modern writers into alternative history. Look in the bibliography. Virtually all of them will reference this book, plus some of the other ones. Worlds in Collision. The title gives you the clue as to what he's talking about. Because having discovered that the plagues in Egypt was then recorded, this was a major event. So what caused them? This was the research he did into this book. Basically, the history we have, which was then proposed by the people who came up with the idea of the uniform and slow process of, the slow process of history, were persisting in the idea of uniformitarianism. Everything happened very slowly. What Velikovsky identified was that things didn't happen very slowly all the time. There were periods of gradual process, periods of gradual time passing. But occasionally there would be extremely violent, catastrophic events. Extremely violent. Now, what are the major natural disasters? You can probably think of most of them. Volcanoes, hurricanes, tsunamis. These are natural disasters. But they're local. All right, they're devastating to anybody who happens to be involved, but they are local. The tsunami we're all familiar with. but it affected a very small part of the Earth's surface. What we're looking at here is an event which could affect the whole planet. Now, what event could affect the whole planet? Everybody on the planet is aware of it, is frightened by it, can do nothing about it. Something approaching from space. Another planet. A comet, a meteor, something is visible. That is the only thing that can cause a catastrophic event on a worldwide scale. Ask one question. What creates a fossil? We know they exist. How are fossils formed? If you bury your dog in your back garden, it'll never become a fossil. The worms will get it. It'll decay. If an elephant keels over and dies in Africa, it'll never become a fossil. The hyenas will get it. The 60 million bison that were slaughtered in America in the 19th century, not one of them, there's no record of any of them left. They're gone. They've been scavenged, they've been removed. So what creates a fossil? We know fossils exist. We've got dinosaurs, we've got birds, we've got all sorts of weird and wonderful creatures. It's basically the exclusion of oxygen. So it has to be buried in a volcanic explosion or a major catastrophic event. Has those happened? Have there been worldwide catastrophic events? This was the other question that Velikovsky asked himself. And he came up with the answer. And the answer was unequivocal. He published the answers in Earth in Upheaval. Again, the title gives you the clue. Earth in Upheaval. This was written in the early 1950s, before we had anything called a space program, anything called scientific explorations. These were events recorded back in the 19th century, where you have erratics. Now, erratic is a rock, and some of them are huge, 10,000 tons or more. Huge rocks which are in places they shouldn't be. There's one in Switzerland with a village built on top of it. And the rock, you can identify it from the structure of the rock and from Norway. But it shouldn't be in Switzerland. We then start looking at floods. Well, we all know about floods. There's one in the Bible. Noah got advance warning. Isn't it interesting? Noah had advance warning. Various reasons are offered as to why he had advance warning, but the simple answer, this is the use of Occam's razor, the simple answer is usually the more likely one, where less assumptions have to be made about how the answer is arrived at. Noah had advance warning, and he had enough time to build quite a large boat. He had advance warning because he saw it, as everybody saw it, an advancing planet, advancing on Earth, on collision course with Earth. It's recorded in the Bible, it's recorded in Greek history, it's recorded in Roman history, it's recorded in Chinese, in Indian, it's recorded in Hindu history. These things are recorded, they're there. But if you don't look at them realistically, you will say they're the myths and legends of forgotten, distant people. They're not myths, they're history. The Bible is basically a historical document. It records events. If you get the dating of it, which the old Bibles have, you can see it quite easily. Hence you know that Noah built the ark in about 2300 BC. You know that Solomon built his temple in about 2015. You know that Saul was Solomon's grandfather, David was his father. He was an important character. He got taken off by Nebuchadnezzar. The Bible records a pretty accurate history that can be cross-checked. So what you've got is a history which appears to be at variance. What Velikovsky was recording was at variance with the existing paradigm of history. Now, the main thing that Velikovsky is remembered for is that his book was banned, suppressed. His book was vilified. He was accused of being a fraud. He was accused of all manner of things. We're very familiar with that type of attack because we've seen it on Von Daniken had the same thing. Graham Hancock had the same thing. John Anthony West had the same thing. Many people who've come up with paradigm-threatening theories which have been backed up by hard factual evidence are attacked. So you know you're on the right line when you're attacked. So if anybody wants to attack me, great, it's to know I'm on the right line. Because what it does is to upset the people who consider that they control the access to the knowledge that people believe. And as soon as you do that, you're in deep trouble, serious trouble, and you have to be prepared to be attacked.